Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Karen Garabani. I've been appointed chair by the county executive, and Eric Friend has been appointed vice chair by the county executive. We do have a forum, so we want to go ahead and get started. Just want to do a quick reminder that the camera and the microphone are very sensitive. So please keep your side conversations to a minimum. If possible, to zero. And there, when you're speaking, please remind us of your name. We will eventually catch on to that hopefully soon, but this is only our second meeting, so please inform us. So I would like to, at this moment, just be able to approve the agenda coming in. Do you have a motion for that?
A motion to
Approve the agenda for tonight? And a second? Yeah, thank you, guys. And
have a vote then. Have a vote then on the approving the agenda.
yes. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, all in favor. I apologize.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have squeezed out the emotions
Sandy
from you
and
guys.
Derek. Is that an approval?
Yes.
Sandy as well? Okay.
Okay, great. So we're just going to get started. We do have an online viewing that's going on. So if you're online, just make sure that you're muted for us here. There will be time for public comment in the end. After this stakeholder advisory committee has met. So we do have agendas out that we can all follow along with. And if you guys are on the stakeholder advisory committee, please, you've been sent reminders if you have not yet completed the ethics trainings, so please send those in. And we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna pass it over to Mark. I'm just gonna give us a couple of introductions and let us know what's going on with the agenda.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Great to see everybody out and great to see a lot of members of the public out as well. My name is Mark Wooldonger. I'm a senior planner with the Office of Planning and Zoning in the Long Range Planning Division. And my colleague Sam Myers here will also be working on the plan, as well as Erica Chapman, who couldn't make it this evening, but you'll also see her face here then around the table at future meetings. At future meetings, you may also see Christina Pompa, our Deputy Planning and Zoning Officer, as well as Cindy Carrier, our Long Range Planning Administrator, and I'll introduce them when they attend as well. So with that, we'll get going.
And if you want the stakeholder advisory committee members that were not here to introduce themselves quickly,
We can certainly do that.
we do have a couple of people who are present today. If maybe you can take just 2 minutes to let us know who you are. Do you want to start?
Yes, I will. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan McGinty. I'm a Brooklyn Park resident. Apologize for missing the kickoff. I booked a trip, couldn't cancel, non-refundable. So happy to be here. A little bit of my background. I've been a resident of North County since 2009. Currently have a board seat with the Greater Baybrook Alliance, as well as the Northern Anne Arundel County Chamber of Commerce. So happy to get to know everyone and get to work here.
And well,
I also had to miss the first meeting. I was grand opening a store. I live in Pasadena since 2013. Super passionate about voting and our healthy waterways. Really honored to serve with you all. You all mean a lot.
Marilyn, right? You were in here at the kickoff. Want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Marilyn Tortorelli. I'm a landscape architect. I've been working in Anne Arundel County out of Laurel for the last 36 years.
I know you're just grabbing your seat, but
Jennifer Fields. What's the top? What are we?
oh,
supposed to
sorry,
say?
just wanted to introduce yourself real quick.
Jennifer Fields. I live in Red Verde, Ferndale area. I lived here for in this area for about 5 years. I worked in decade.
Okay, ready for me to, continue on?
Yeah, sure, and just a quick reminder, if you're interested in making longer public comments, and this is for everyone who's hanging out, you can definitely make longer comments by sending them via email if you want to get your thought process together and send that later. You can also do that. Thank you.
Okay, so great. Our topics tonight are the history, land use history of Region 1, and we'll talk about some of the environmental issues as well. So again, with talking about the history, we really just want to ground ourselves with that first, understand how some of these land use patterns evolve. And then we'll pivot to the environmental issues. That was one of the biggest concerns that we heard about when we did a lot of early public outreach. So we want to address that right up front. So again, region plans, this is the opportunity, this comes on the heels of Plan 2040, which was the countywide master plan that was adopted about two and a half years ago. And during that process, the county said, look, we can't tackle every community and drill deeper, dive deeper into these communities and understand those specific issues. So we wanted to set up these region plan processes. So that's where we are now. We are just finishing up regions 2, 4, and 7. And this is the second round, regions 1, 3, and 9. And again, this gives us the opportunity to the Office of Planning and Zoning to really connect with you all, the community, understand what the specific issues are, the specific locations where these issues are happening, and ultimately come up with a plan that addresses that, and a plan being one that identifies what those issues are, and then strategies to accomplish or achieve or rectify some of those issues. The other component to it is a zoning map. So zoning wasn't done with the countywide master plan, and the region plan process is that opportunity to do that. So we'll get into some of those more specific and like land use and zoning terms and issues a little bit later in the early spring. And then we'll roll out some zoning maps for you all to react to. But for the first part, we really just want to introduce you to some of these general topics, the environment, transportation, the economy, schools, because everything is interrelated, okay? So keep that in mind as we're going through this process. So just one visual here to help you conceptualize how all these plans fit together. The countywide master plan is that general development plan. We branded it as Plan 2040. And really that spins then some of these other gears and other plans, county capital improvement projects, any changes to the county code that actually indicate what you can do and can't do on your property. So again, just keep that in mind that what happens here also has an impact on a lot of the other county processes. Okay. Again, I think you all are familiar with your roles and responsibilities here. You can always go back to that handbook we provided. But again, what we had heard in the kickoff meeting was, several individuals asked, what can you all be doing outside of this stakeholder advisory committee meeting? So I look at it as a two-way street. We're providing you information, and then you're providing us information from the folks that you interact with in your community. So we just ask that you share this information with the community, share about what we're talking about. These stakeholder advisory committees, when they're stakeholder advisory committee meetings, when they're happening, when we have public engagement opportunities, when those are happening. And then if you are hearing, just again, in passing with friends, family, neighbors, bring that information back here and we can talk about it some more. Just get it out there and on the record is what we appreciate. But the bottom line is we don't expect you to go door to door and knock at everybody's door and let them know this is happening. Okay. We'll do our part in again, trying to blast out these public engagement opportunities as best we can. But we also then rely on you to share this information with folks as well. So just a quick overview of our process. We are currently in that needs assessment timeframe. We just closed a visioning questionnaire that was available for the public to comment on. We'll be sharing those results with you shortly. And you'll see how then that sets sort of this hierarchy or this umbrella or framework of developing goals and strategies of which those should align with that vision. Okay. Like I mentioned, we'll be updating the plan land use map as well as comprehensive zoning. And then this time next year, hopefully we're going into the legislative phase where we've got that plan and it gets now reviewed by the planning advisory board and ultimately the county council who adopts the plan and the zoning map. So here are the topics that we're going to be covering during our next 7 meetings. Environment and history, all the way to housing and development, transportation, land use. Again, everything's interconnected. Of course, you all are going to be talking about things that are going to be hitting on transportation probably today. Or in our next meeting, you're going to be talking about housing issues. Okay, so again, understanding that it is all interrelated. So with that brief overview, I'm going to hand it off to Darian, who can share about the brief history of Region 1.
Well, hello, my name is Darian Beberungen, and I am a senior planner in the cultural resources section, planning and zoning. And our purview is historic buildings and districts, archaeological sites, cemeteries, and scenic and historic roads. So tonight, like Mark said, I'm going to give you just a brief overview of the history of the region, because I think it's important to understand how the area developed historically over time, which provides us an insight into how and why it exists the way that it does today. Long before the imprint of modern society, the region was populated by prehistoric people drawn to the area for its abundant animal and plant life. Partially flanked by the Patapsco River, the region was also a favorite spot for Native Americans because of the river's bountiful supply of fish and other seafood. These early inhabitants first appeared in the area approximately 13,000 years ago. Evidence of their occupation was discovered near BWI Airport by archaeologists more than a decade ago. Dating to 11,000 BC, this site is one of the earliest known Native American sites yet to be found in Maryland. The area's geographical position, too, within a larger regional system of migratory and trade routes that were established in the prehistoric era, created the first trails and footpaths, which later became the transportation routes of early European settlers. By the time of the first European settlement in Anne Arundel County in 1649, the native Algonquin tribes had abandoned the present-day area of the county. The first European settlers were Protestant Englishmen from Virginia who established a hamlet known as Providence on the mouth of the Severn River. The population quickly increased, primarily along the shoreline of the bay and its tributaries. This rapid settlement resulted in the creation of Baltimore County in 1659. And a boundary dispute ensued between Anne Arundel and Baltimore counties, lasting into the early 18th century. The new Baltimore County claimed the northeast portion of Anne Arundel, north of the Magothy River. In 1696, the legislature returned about half of the peninsula to Anne Arundel County, making the division line halfway between the Patapsco and the Magothy Rivers. Finally, in 1726, the Patapsco River became the northern boundary for Anne Arundel County. By this time, plantations were established in the region where tobacco, corn, and grains were grown, and the region's bountiful stands of timber were harvested. Baltimore, too, was emerging as an important port along the Atlantic seaboard. Outlying areas such as this region were used for resource extraction, such as timber, iron, and other minerals. Some of the first property owners in the region were from the Benson, Smith, Harmon, Shipley, Worthington, Linthicum, Hammond, Cromwell, Harrell, Walker, Stoll, and Dorsey families. And they and their descendants and subsequent owners amassed large tracts of land, ranging from several hundred to several thousand acres. One of the most prominent was Colonel Hammond of Curtis Bay, who was known as the great landowner at that time. By the 19th century, the area supported numerous farms where fruits and vegetables were grown for the markets in Baltimore and as far away as Boston and Montreal. Known as truck farming, this livelihood proved profitable for farmers in northern Anne Arundel County specifically. Seasonal laborers, mostly Eastern European immigrants from Baltimore, were used to harvest the crops. The laborers were brought to local farms where they lived in picker shanties for 6 to 8 weeks during the harvest season. And this photo here is an example of one of the shanties that was located on the Bottomley Farm, which was on Fort Smallwood Road. Truck farming remained a primary source of income for many residents of the northern part of the county well into the 20th century. The rapid growth of Baltimore, beginning in the mid-19th century, brought major changes to the region. In 1853, the Patapsco Company was incorporated and began laying out the town of Brooklyn. This effort was bolstered in 1856 by the construction of the Light Street Bridge, making Brooklyn Park one of the first suburbs of Baltimore. Connecting South Baltimore and Brooklyn across the Patapsco and Middle Branch, the bridge became known as the Long Bridge, or sometimes the Brooklyn Bridge. The town as we know it today began to develop in 1916. A real estate speculator named John Culver saw an opportunity to provide attractive housing outside of Baltimore for workers who wanted to move away from the urban environment. He bought up farmland and laid out the new community of Brooklyn Park in 5 parts, respecting the existing road system, and that road system remains today. Access to Brooklyn Park for Baltimore expanded in 1917 with the construction of the Hanover Street Bridge. Then in 1919, the northeastern portion of the Curtis Bay Peninsula and the old section of Brooklyn were annexed by the city of Baltimore. Brooklyn Park remained within Anne Arundel County and continued to grow as a residential and commercial suburb of Baltimore. Like much of northern Anne Arundel County, the region was also affected by the arrival of rail transportation in the 19th century. In 1868, the Baltimore-Potomac Railroad was constructed, connecting Baltimore and Washington, D.C. Stations were established along the line, causing small villages to develop around them. The station at Harmon's, for example, evolved into a small village with a post office, store, and other amenities. In 1908, the Washington, Baltimore, and Annapolis, with the WBNA electric railway, was constructed east of Baltimore-Potomac line. It ran through Pumphrey, Linthicum, Shipley, and present-day BWI Airport, in part following the MTA light rail line. The current roadbed of the WBNA road, located south of the airport, uses some of the original railroad beds. The WBNA remained in operation until 1935. The coming of the railroads was also the impetus for the establishment of the town of Linthicum in 1908, shortly after construction of the WBNA electric railway. It was developed on a portion of over 1,600-acre tract of land obtained by Abner Linthicum in 1801. The Linthicum family farmed the land for more than a century until the arrival of the WBNA, when the opportunity presented itself for development of a residential community. The Linthicum Heights Company was formed, and a town was laid out, roughly centering on the intersection of Maple Avenue and Cantney Road. With easy commuting distance to Baltimore, it soon became a desirable place to raise a family. By 1916, 50 houses were built, as well as a church and school. In addition to the older Linthicum family houses, the surviving early 20th century buildings still convey the sense and character of a small turn-of-the-century town. Although much of the residential development in the region was concentrated in Linthicum and Brooklyn Park, they were predominantly white communities, but other smaller historic African communities emerged within the region. The Patapsco Park area, widely known as Pumphrey, is an historic African-American enclave with roots dating to well before the Civil War. It was established in 1832 by 75 African Americans on lands acquired by Quaker Walter Pumphrey in 1708. What is today known as Belgrove Road became a focal point for Pumphrey's businesses and houses of worship. The community surrounded the BNA Shortline Railroad Station, and today is located mainly east, near where the rail line intersects with Baltimore Annapolis Boulevard and Belgrove Road. Another African-American community is Cedar Hill, which is located just south of Cedar Hill Cemetery. It developed after the Civil War and centered around the Mount Calvary Church. Several houses, an old Masonic lodge, and the site of a Rosenwald school were situated along Cedar Hill and Stone Hill lanes. The school and one built in Pumphrey were constructed in the 1920s using the Rosenwald School Fund, which provided funding for schools for African-American children. Initiated by Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears Roebuck Company, the program remained in operation from 1911 to 1932. Thousands of schools, some of which are still standing today, were built across the South using this fund. The Pumphrey Rosenwald School is one that still survives in the county. It stands on Berlin Avenue in the historic Pumphrey community, and it's been rehabilitated into a residence. Major transportation projects that were initiated in the early to mid 20th century have had a far-reaching effect on the economic vitality of the region. The Baltimore-Annapolis Boulevard, established in 1912, followed the approximate route of the earlier north-south road. Governor Ritchie Highway was constructed between 1934 and 1938 as a works progress administration project. And it was intended as a scenic highway and designed to divert traffic away from the growing congestion on Crane Highway and Union Boulevard. Then in the 1940s, the Baltimore Aviation Commission selected Northern Anne Arundel County as a site for a new metropolitan airport. In 1947, construction began for the Friendship International Airport. The name was changed to Baltimore Washington International Airport in 1973. As BWI Airport has grown, the surrounding region has become a magnet for business and industry. Another significant impact to the area occurred in 1942 with construction of the Baltimore Washington Parkway, which was not completed until 1950 to 1954 due to World War II. Today, it remains a scenic corridor between Washington and Baltimore and provides access to government installations and residential communities. Like most of Anne Arundel County, historically Region 1 was a productive farming region with water-related enterprises throughout much of its history. The railroad industry made a major impact during the 19th and early 20th centuries, followed by construction of the WI Airport, the BW Parkway, and the Baltimore Beltway. These developments, as well as the suburban expansion of Baltimore, have transformed the region from a once expansive farmland to a transportation, business, industrial, and residential center in Anne Arundel County. The continued growth and development of the region throughout the 20th century has had an impact on the historic resources in the region. One of those resources is the Harmons Historic District. It is concentrated around approximately a half-mile area of Old Dorsey Road and Old Tolling Road. This district is bounded by Dorsey Road to the north and the Old Baltimore Potomac Railroad to the east. The village of Harmons contained a concentration of historic buildings that dated from the mid to late 19th century. The Harmons area prospered as a farming community well into the 19th century. Gradually, however, with the coming of the railroad, the town began to grow and the center of the community would change its location from Ridge Road to what is now Old Dorsey Road. During the decade after the railroad began operating, a village grew near the station. Like other railroad communities in the county, the core of Harmons consisted of a church, school, and the general store or post office, as well as the blacksmith shop. With redevelopment and upzoning the area to a W2 or light industrial, many of the original historic buildings have been demolished and only traces can still be seen of the town's railroad bygone era. One building that still survives is the old general store and post office building, pictured here. Hezekiah Shipley built this combined residence and store in 1875. It eventually passed to Edwin Harmon in 1899, who was appointed postmaster of what was then called Harmon Station. A convenience store and post office operated in this building until 1974 when the store ceased operation. The post office eventually closed in 1990. And today, the former railroad community contains multiple contractor yards and light industrial uses. But Region 1 contains a number of other historic resources. A few of the more prominent ones include the Linthicum Heights Historic District, which is what we're in, the Benson Hammond House, Twin Oaks, Turkey Hill, Sunny Fields, and the Curtis Bay U.S. Coast Guard Yard, all of which are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And these resources represent the broad patterns of the history that have made a significant contribution to the development of the region, including agriculture, transportation, industry, and suburban development patterns, as well as the presence of the military. There are many more though, but this is just a few examples of those. So I'm going to leave it here. Again, that was kind of brief overview, history in a nutshell. It was a lot, but if anyone has any questions on anything or comments.
That was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And I think the historic narrative, are you all passing that out to them?
Yeah, I'll add that, this presentation we made available, online for the committee and the public. the write-up that Darren did for the region review was as well.
Really good. Very interesting.
Okay, so before we move on to the next presentation, we want to get your thoughts and hear about what the most important issues are, or what you're most concerned about in Region 1. So take this quick survey and I'll pull up the results here in real time. Yep, I'll go back here, sorry.
This is also for the joining public as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yes, if you guys could, you can scan the code as well, and you can do the surveys that come out as well. Or your input as well.
We're gonna encourage you not to take your phones out, you just like keep them away.
Yeah, now's your chance.
Right.
Scan the QR code, you can, photo app on your phone or go to menti.com.
Right.
Just for tonight, yeah, question, Q&A.
Yes, just for tonight.
Yeah.
Grab your phone, I can have something for you.
Come on. There you go. There you Mark, can you go back?
Yeah, okay. Where you can go to, again, menti.com. And the code is 220055.
Yes, sure.
So this word cloud is populating as you're voting. So some of the issues that we're hearing, air, water, trees. So is that the lack of trees potentially, or maintaining the trees that we have? Ensuring that there are buffers to the river. Keep flipping around here. Right. So again, what we've heard too is from a lot of the public outreach that we've already done. These are some of the same issues: water quality, a lot of trash and litter along the roads and in the waterways. Some of the hazardous materials, particulate matter. We're noticing a lot of truck traffic in this area that kicks off a lot of the emissions, and air pollution, airport noise and fumes. And green space. So seeing some water quality and green space, open space. We're going to break out into two groups later, and we're going to dive deeper into those two specific issues as well. So again, just one quick little pivot here as we move on to then the environmental presentations. So
Yeah, and if I can comment while you're doing that, it's really interesting that, you know, just in those quick words you put out, that aligns well with what we've heard back from the community feedback we've heard, right? And we've put on online surveys, asking folks like what the important issues are for them in the region, given them apps, you can go and put a point on a map and point out areas that you're concerned about, areas that you want to see improved, and go on to community events, and those are often the same issues that we hear when we think about environmental issues. So it's nice to see there's kind of alignment in the group, thinking of this group, of what we've heard broader from the community.
and Mike, could you introduce yourself?
Michael Stringer, Austin, I work with Mark.
Michael Stringer, he's in Office of Planning and Zoning, Long Range Planning Division as well. Yeah. So with that, I'll hand it over to Eric Michelson.
Can I speak then?
Oh, we have a public comment period at the end of the meeting.
Okay, all right. My name is Eric Michelson. I'm the Deputy Director of Anne Arundel County's Department of Public Works. I run the Bureau of Watershed Protection and Restoration. So we're involved with the protection and replacement, repair, stormwater collection infrastructure, as well as water quality restoration efforts undertaken by the county. Next slide. So the geography, the watershed geography of Region One, it's a challenging area. It's an area that, as Darian had presented, has been developed over the course of the last century or so, is currently one of the more developed portions of the county. Obviously running towards the Patapsco, we call this area the Patapsco non-tidal region, where you've got the main stem of the river, and then the Patapsco tidal portion here, that's tidally influenced. Just to cut through some of the jargon, a watershed is basically the land mass that drains to a particular waterway. So when I say a watershed, that's what I'm talking about, essentially the landscape that's all funneling water to that, creek, Sawmill Creek or Marley Creek or the other Patapsco River tributaries. And so this map here, which is actually available as an interactive GIS resource on our website, shows where we've undertaken infrastructure projects as well as restoration projects, including some with our nonprofit partners. Obviously, Region 1 and then Region 3 are very closely linked. Region 3 is where, for instance, the tidal portion of Sawmill Creek is, but basically almost all the watershed of Sawmill Creek is in Region 1. And so what happens in Region 1 affects Region 3 in that regard. And there's a lot of those kinds of relationships. One of the things that I'll mention that's unique and a bit of a challenge in Region 1 too is that within 4 miles of BWI Airport, there are special restrictions about open water treatment areas. Essentially, there are ponds that exist, but the airport has really strong limitations about creating more open water features because they're very concerned about bird strikes and that kind of thing. So that's a challenge that we don't have in much of the rest of the county, but that becomes a challenge as you operate around BWI Airport. Next slide. The key watershed issues throughout the whole county, but in particular in this region, are nutrient pollution, so nitrogen and phosphorus, which are in some respects, the components of fertilizer, good things for growing plants. If you have too much of them and they run off into these waterways, though, they end up fueling algae blooms, which is small plants that are growing in the water column that can, when they die off, create dissolved oxygen demand and can cause problems for fish and other wildlife. Throughout much of the county, the streams that are feeding these tributaries look a lot like those on the top, where you've got severe erosion, in part, again, because of a combination of things. Darian mentioned the agricultural history of Anne Arundel County. We still think of South County as agricultural, but the reality is it wasn't very long ago that even this portion of the county was agricultural. And so a lot of the sediment and other runoff from the agricultural use still exists in our stream systems, and then is acted upon by the runoff that comes off of our developed landscape. In this region, there were some pretty interesting also attempts at managing stormwater, like the photo in the bottom right-hand corner here, where stormwater was put into concrete trapezoidal channels, usually in the mid-1960s, and then vented off of developed communities throughout Glen Burnie or up in Brooklyn. And then in this case, shooting straight into the Patapsco River without a lot of treatment. That was sort of state-of-the-art stormwater management in 1965. The habitat loss, again, primarily through development activity that's occurred over the course of the past several decades, obviously the forest loss, and then issues of inadequate stream buffers. We like to have at least 100-foot forested buffers on the edges of our streams, but the reality is again, that in more urbanized portions of the county, if the streams exist at all, if they haven't been put in pipes and buried underground, they're oftentimes pushed up against the people's backyards or have been reconfigured in ways that are not necessarily conducive to providing lots of treatment. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the overlapping environmental responsibilities at the different levels of government. So in terms of our program and in terms of a lot of the things the county is doing around its wastewater treatment plants and other efforts, those are driven by the Federal Clean Water Act, which was passed in the early 1970s. Each of the county's wastewater treatment plants has what's called an NPDES permit, basically to manage discharges. The county itself has a stormwater permit that treats it like a point source discharge. That's what we're responsible for. And then the total maximum daily load is essentially a pollution diet, if you will, that was put in place by the EPA about a decade and a half ago. that requires each of the Chesapeake Bay states to reduce nutrients and sediment into the Chesapeake Bay in corresponding amounts in order to get the bay and the tributaries healthy again. So those federal requirements trickle down to us at the county level. At the state, there's a Forest Conservation Act that dictates sort of the forest impacts that are allowed and forest impacts that have to be mitigated by new development activities. And then that translates down actually to the county level, and currently the county's Forest Conservation Act is a bit more stringent, even in the state law. That's usually how it works, is that lower levels of government can be stricter than higher levels of government. They can't be any less strict. And then the county Office of Planning and Zoning enforces the county Forest Conservation Ordinance, as well as these environmental buffers. So streams and their buffers, like I say, for streams, there's generally 100-foot stream buffer on either edge of those for new development. Wetlands and their buffers, 25-foot standard buffer for wetlands, and then bogs. And these are really high quality wetlands that generally occur in specific parts of the county, largely in the Pasadena area, the upper Magothy River watershed. There's spread out a little bit more, but that's generally the area. And then steep slopes. So areas where you've got 25% or greater in terms of steep slopes have special protections in terms of needing to not disturb those and offset them. In terms of floodplains, the county's been, I think, sort of at the forefront of floodplain connection for a number of decades now. They require that when subdivisions occur, the floodplains be basically deeded fee simple to the county. So the county owns much of the floodplain area within the county in commercial or industrial properties. It's usually an easement and similarly protected. And then there's a critical area ordinance, which is relevant to the area within 1,000 feet of tidewater. So in Region 1, it would really just be mostly the Curtis Bay and Curtis Creek areas. There are special protections for impacts in those zones that are again enforced by or regulated by Office of Planning and Zoning. Next slide. So as I mentioned at the outset, we are involved not just in water quality protection, but also in infrastructure protection. This is West Nursery Road, a project that was done last year. There was an issue with the culvert basically getting repeatedly plugged with trees and debris that was coming down the system, and the culverts were failing. So we went in there and reconfigured that. A lot of the roadway infrastructure, again, especially in our older communities, was probably under designed for contemporary runoff conditions. Maybe designed to pass smaller flows and so can be prone to flooding in certain areas. Next slide, Mark. This is the downstream end of that area that was protected. More rock than we'd like to use, but sometimes in these infrastructure projects, we've got really constrained areas that we're operating within. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the different eras of development associated stormwater management. So again, much of Region 1 was developed prior to any stormwater management requirements. Really contemporary, or the beginnings of contemporary stormwater management requirements in the state began in the 1980s. And those were really aimed at flood control. So there were facilities. This is down in Millersville. It's basically called a dry detention pond. It was a big basin. Sometimes these areas were used as flood control and rec areas, which you can imagine was less than ideal. But they provided very little water quality treatment. Were just intended to sort of shave the peak flow of storms off to protect downstream areas. So we're looking at a lot of these areas as opportunities for retrofit. Next slide, Mark. The next era that came was around 2000 or so, which was the era of these open water ponds. So if you've seen communities developed over the last 20, 30 years, many of them have, a large open water facility, maybe shunted to one edge of the community, surrounded by a fence. Maybe an amenity. Actually, there's a big pond on Music Lane right around the corner that existed, and then we went in and retrofitted. But under ideal circumstances, these become sort of community amenities or areas where people can gather. In a lot of cases, those are kind of shunted off to the back of these communities. And then that was really when the focus on water quality treatment began, was creating these basins that would provide some opportunity, nutrient processing for sediment capture and that sort of. Next slide, Mark. This is the sort of the contemporary era of stormwater management, which they call environmental site design. This is a community in Laurel called Watershed. I just put these pictures in here because I think it's kind of a nice example of the approach. The idea is collect the stormwater as close to where it's falling, whether that be rooftops or parking lots or roadways, get it into the ground very quickly, and then try to distribute practices across the site. That creates some challenges from the perspective of managing practices because you exploded the number of practices on a given site. But the idea is to have, rather than stormwater centralized in one location, distributed across the community. And in the townhouse community, that can provide particular challenges because everything is so tightly bound together. But I think this is a nice example of basically sort of winding the system through the community, again, trying to make it an amenity, and which is, you know, the kind of thing a creative landscape architect or engineer can do. Next slide. I just wanted to point out some examples of projects that we've supported or undertaken in the region or around. This is a stormwater wetland creation at St. Mark's Church, I think on Dorsey Road, right near the airport. This was a case where the community had, or the church, excuse me, had failing stormwater infrastructure sort of running under the parking lot. They had flooding concerns. We were able to basically do what's called sort of a daylighting of that stormwater system and create this feature adjacent to the church and address some of the needs that they had, as well as meet some of the county's clean water goals as well. Next slide, Mark. I realize this is probably just outside the district or the region. This is the Cromwell Elementary School. To the extent possible, we try to work closely with the school board to undertake projects on school properties. This was a case where the whole school was being rebuilt, so there was a real opportunity to go in, do advanced stormwater management, create an outdoor education center for the school, and create some signage for the kids as well.
Nice place for mosquitoes to
Yeah, it's so I'll address it. Can you go back, Mark? That's
Sorry about that.
okay, so next, you can go to the next slide because that's still Cromwell. Yeah, so a lot of times people will, the first thing they'll see, you've got water standing on the landscape, they'll say, well, that's a good place for mosquitoes to breed. And the reality is wherever you have water, you're gonna have mosquitoes. There's no question about that in Arundel County in this area. The difference is, do you have the predatory organisms? Do you have a healthy ecosystem where you've got frogs and fish and predatory insects that are eating them? And in a system like this, a wetland system that created like this,
Yeah.
you got the opportunity for that in your flower pots or in your kids' toys that are in the backyard where they've got water. That's like ideal mosquito habitat because there really is no predator community there. And so it's a balance, and it's certainly one of those things that can be difficult to overcome because we've been conditioned pretty well in that regard. Next slide, Mark. In addition to those sort of stormwater retrofits or stormwater management opportunities, we'll also look at outfall restoration opportunities. This is off Oakwood Road near actually Granite Baptist Church. I don't know if folks know what that area is, a tributary to Marley Creek. A lot of times, again, when you've got that collected stormwater from the developed landscape and discharging into these natural areas, you get these erosive conditions. Here you can see those sort of telltale red clays of northern Anne Arundel County, which can be particularly potent when they get into the tidewater areas. This was a case where we went back in and repaired this outfall. Mark, next slide. And this is the system like immediately after construction. In this case, you can actually see we installed a bridge as part of this feature. When we've got sites that are in very heavily developed areas or where there's a lot of opportunity for access, we try to prioritize creating signage or creating other kinds of trail or infrastructure opportunities like this. This actually, the bridge connects their fields to the parking lot for the church, and so is a necessity in this case. Next slide, Mark. This is Ferndale Branch. So this is a tributary to Sawmill Creek before it was restored. Next slide. That's Ferndale Branch afterwards. This project was just completed last year. We've got another project coming up on Irving Branch, I think in the springtime, another trip to Sawmill Creek. So we've got a lot of work going on up here. One of the things, I think countywide, the focus has been trying to make sure that there's an equitable distribution of investments in public infrastructure. And for our program, it's kind of been interesting because we really have targeted the parts of the county where there was not stormwater management historically, and those have tended to be the places where that haven't necessarily gotten a lot of attention with regards to other infrastructure. So we've spent a lot of time in the Glen Burnie area and surrounding vicinity, focused on these areas that have degraded over the course of the past several decades. Next slide. Shoreline restoration. This is Fort Smallwood Park. This was a project that was actually executed by our Bureau of Engineering. Some of this is what's called living shoreline. So you can see these sort of segmented features on either side of the park where there's basically some beach strand, marsh creation. The area that's right pointing out in the bay is armored with what we call revetment. We try to avoid that unless there's really, really high energy regimes. And of course, that location does have those. But trying to integrate features that allow for human access and create that intertidal habitat that's been knocked out of a lot of the surrounding coastal areas. Next slide. Reducing flood risk. So we are working with our Bureau of Highways. The county put in place a resilience authority a couple of years ago, and we work with them to pursue opportunities for flood mitigation. We actually recently submitted with a number of other surrounding jurisdictions, including Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Maryland DNR, an application for some of the Patapsco tributary work, including several tributaries to Marley Creek, seeking funding from NOAA. And so we're hoping that that grant will come through, but there is a lot of focus collaboratively looking at opportunities to reduce flood risk as well. All right.
Question?
Yeah.
You want to take some questions?
Oh, yeah, sure. If there's questions, I'm happy to take them. And I'll be in one of the breakout groups as well. Yes, ma'am.
You answered my question at the end about the joint ventures with the city, the counties, because the Patapsco River, a lot of that's coming out of the city.
Right.
So I'm glad you answered that. I really appreciate that. What is that partnership looking like? Is that something that we're having to push for, or they're very open to that, or what's going on with that?
So in terms of this particular grant application, each of these entities, like you say, the Patapsco is a shared border with many jurisdictions. Each of those entities sort of had initiatives going on in the Patapsco watershed. And so there was an opportunity to bundle all that work. I think it was $40 or $50 million worth of work in total. And basically pursue that as an integrated grant application with NOAA. The partnership element is a big selling point for a lot of these grant applications at this point. But what I'll say though is, and you bring up a really good point, which is, what goes on in Baltimore City or Baltimore County affects us big time in particularly northern Arundel County. For the past couple of years, the city has had issues getting its wastewater treatment plants at the Patapsco and Back River under control. There were nutrient discharges that we were picking up in, Stony Creek and other tributaries to the Patapsco. We were actually seeing that signal of those wastewater treatment plants not working properly. The city has obligations with regards to trash reduction. The county does not explicitly have those now, but we've really focused a lot of our trash reduction efforts up in North County to make sure we're reducing trash to the Patapsco so we don't get a regulatory requirement. So we've got additional street sweeping and some other initiatives up in these areas to try to reduce trash. And then the other thing I'll say is, and I think I saw it in some of the comments early on, is that sort of these historical toxins, so things like PCBs and other industrial pollutants that are no longer produced, are still an issue in places like Curtis Bay and Curtis Creek, or the Coast Guard facility and whatnot. And so we're collaboratively working with each other as well as institutions like UMBC to try to figure out innovative strategies to tackle, to both track down and then tackle some of those historical pollutants as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I live on Stony Creek,
Okay.
and our big nemesis is the plant, the coal plant.
Oh, Wagner,
Yeah,
our Brandon Shores, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where are we with that?
Well, the latest I heard was that Brandon Shores is, they're planning to shut it down in a couple of years, but I think by 2025.
The 18.
Well, yeah, we'll see if that proceeds, but that's what I heard. In the last
Yeah. And of course, you know, the dredging,
Mhm.
but I'm sure somebody will talk about that.
I don't know if there's a plan explicitly to, but I can touch on it. So we have representatives from Public Works who sit on the Port Authority's Dredge Committee. There
I
are,
want to catch everybody up on what I'm talking about.
oh, sure. So the Port of Baltimore has basically a constant dredging operation to make sure that channel is kept clear. They've got dredging facilities at the mouth of the Patapsco. And they're always looking for it. This area here is what we're talking about. They're always looking for innovative ways to either beneficially reuse that material, and there are restrictions about how the material that's dredged from the harbor can be used. But they're exploring opportunities of using it maybe in some marsh restoration up on the Baltimore County side of Patapsco. And then they're also looking for ways to increase the longevity of their dredge material placement sites that they've got. The county does some dredging, but it's dwarfed compared to what the port ends up doing. And so there's, again, lots of ongoing conversations. They want to try to be a good neighbor. The county has its Cox Creek water treatment plant up in that same area where the power plant is and where the dredge material sites are. And so again, there's a lot of coordination there, and the county in particular, with regards to Cox Creek, has done some incredible things in terms of upgrading that plant, having it run well below its permit limits, and really taking a big step in terms of improving water quality discharges to Tabasco at that location.
But I think it's fair to say that what they're dredging up is nasty. And it's flowing down right into our waterways. Stony Creek, Rock Creek, etc. So it's region 1, and we should be aware of it.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of. One other thing that that had been sort of pitched in the last year or so was the idea of actually excavating bottom in this area as a place for some material place, because there's a lot, it's very sandy actually in the area offshore here, which is a material that is a commodity that could potentially be replaced with dredge material. I think that kind of died on the vine. There were a number of political figures in North County who I think wanted to put the brakes on that a little bit, but it's something to be mindful of, because the port is a huge economic driver for the state, obviously. And so what goes on there definitely has a dramatic impact in this region, for sure.
Help me.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been trying, I live at 700 block Belleville Road. Okay, it's years ago, it was an easement, they gave my mom an easement. But that is a pipe that comes under Belleville Road, flows into the yard. They were supposed to maintain that, they don't maintain it. It's trash coming in. I had my son go up there and try to get some of that trash out. Now you got hubcaps coming down through that pipe. It's like it's coming from the top, where was people up at the top, drop that trash, and it comes right on down. Don't let it rain. It's a mess when it rains. They were supposed to maintain it to go down to the, because I live where the river is, but Pasco flows in the back. So it was supposed to maintain, no maintaining. My mom died in 2009 and nothing. And I've been calling and calling and calling.
I'll give you my information.
Okay, I appreciate
Sure.
it.
One of the things that the community is really worried about is whether any of that dredging material was allowed to be placed in this landfill that's behind us. So one of the things that were really concerned about, like I said, that the dredging material is very yucky. We don't know what all has been there. We do know that that is a convenient spot for people who will dredge and want a place to put that dredging material. That's been a very convenient spot. And we have seen the trucks come in and be loaded with something that spills water all down Belleville Road and into 648 and up into that landfill.
So I'd just like to reiterate that we do have time for public comment in the end. We don't, this is not the time that we're having public comment. I don't mean to cut you off, but we do have plenty of time for that in the end, and your longer comments will be answered by the committee, if you submit them in writing as well. But we're just gonna move on and we'll be able to answer the questions in the end.
Appreciate it. Okay, I'd like to introduce the next speaker.
Okay, the next folks we're gonna have speaking, again, I'm Mike Stringer, Office of Planning and Zoning. Next folks we're gonna speak to you are from the Watershed Stewards Academy. They're a nonprofit organization that the county helped set up to work with these kind of stormwater issues, to engage and educate communities about them and provide support to empower communities to address these issues on private lands. So let's introduce Noelle.
Everybody, I'm Noelle Child, the Director of Education and Equity Initiatives at Watershed Stewards Academy.
Maxwell Acker Carter, I am the Community Engagement Specialist at the Watershed Stewards Academy.
And following up from what Eric was talking about, we've got all these problems across our watershed. Watershed problems need people solutions. People are the ones who are going to get this right.
So if we think back almost 15 years ago to 2009, the county and the public school system realized there was a lot of energy among community residents to take action in their communities to help address some of these environmental issues, but they lacked the resources and tools to do so. So that's where WSA was born, as our goal is to train and mobilize community leaders to take that environmental action in their communities, to be these environmental leaders.
And so we offer training programs, we offer a course for Master Watershed Stewards that gives them technical experience, but also hands-on training and knowledge about how to best engage communities. We have restoration projects that we work on, and we also provide mentorship and support to people in all different communities.
So we're in communities in so many different ways with so many different partners. We're working with school systems to train high school students to take environmental action and do the education in their local communities or to their fellow high school students. We're working with libraries and congregations to do projects. Specifically, we've done 2 projects in Brooklyn Parks of native plant sensory gardens for the community to use to learn about the benefits of native plants in different ways that are just, a visual garden, more interactive green space. We're doing tree plantings with communities, working with community organizations, community serving organizations such as the Judy Center to bring these educational programs to spread the word about how we can do different types of environmental stewardship.
The last thing that we want to share, we want to know what you need for your community. Specifically in 2024, we're going to be doing some listening sessions, some surveys in Northern Anne Arundel County. We would love to find out what kinds of educational opportunities people in Region 1 would like so that we can best get you guys the information that you need for the best environmental outcomes. We're going to have a sign-up sheet go around. We've also got some information about different programs that we're offering, including Stormwater Success, program for property managers and people who have projects that they're trying to figure out how to manage that's going to begin tomorrow. So please stop by and see us at the end if you're interested in learning about any of those, and we'll get that sign-up sheet going around. And I just got to give a shout out to Sandy Hartzell, who is an amazing watershed steward that you have on your SAC. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Just gonna go back here real quick, in case anybody missed it, the website is there on the left-hand side, in case you want some more information. Okay, next up is Sarah Hope.
Can I talk about open space for a second?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let me bring that back up.
You guys are going faster than I thought. Switching up a little bit. Just I want to talk for a minute about open space and green space in the northern part of the county. This map on the screen shows a diagram of a plan comparing that adopted by the county council last year called the Green Infrastructure Master Plan. And what it does, it maps out what the largest remaining green spaces, natural areas in the county are, and connections between them. And as you can see, of course, we follow along the Tapsco River, we've got the state park there, we follow along Cabin Branch, and then some of the streams around the west side of the airport. And just like Eric was saying before, as this was kind of the oldest area that was developed, most urbanized part of the county, this has the least amount of green space that we see in the county. The our Department of Recreation and Parks every 8 years updates their countywide parks master plan. And within that, they do a proximity analysis and an equity analysis, measuring how close people are to parks. And this area, especially around Brooklyn and then over towards kind of Severn, north of Fort Meade areas and north of Glen Burnie, have been identified as areas that both lack in that proximity, having parks that you can easily get to. And then when they overlay a social equity lens on that, they also see that, those are the areas that we have some of our highest concentrations of minority communities, communities of color, and some of our lowest income communities. So again, it's an area where we're trying to figure out how to prioritize investing in these areas that in the past have not been invested in. And so one of the important recommendations of this plan is not just think about just the biggest areas that you can serve, but also how do we try to integrate green space into our more developed communities. And so we'll talk more about this plan when we get to our small groups in a little bit. We'll roll that map out so you can look at it in more detail, kind of let us know areas that are important to you in terms of green space in the region. And then I'd like to introduce the Greater Baybrook Alliance, who over the last couple of years prepared a plan called the Blue-Green Master Plan that focuses just on that issue of how do you try to integrate green space into a developed neighborhood like Brooklyn Park. So we have Sarah Hope on the line, who's going to talk us through that effort.
All right, can you guys hear me? Hi.
Sure that we got you.
I have a feeling we'll have somebody's giving me the thumbs up. Someone out there can hear
We
me.
can't hear you on our end. I'm sure you're speaking.
So am I gonna be, sorry, we didn't work this out ahead of time. Am I presenting my screen or are you guys presenting my slides? Because I can't see my slides right now on your screen.
Check to see if your speaker turned to the out.
Yeah, it is.
Can you not hear me?
Yeah, I've got it all the way up for the rotator.
Marsh, they were disconnected.
Yeah.
Gotta love technology.
Not everyone it works.
Mike, are you texting with her? Okay.
Can you just stick green?
Can you guys not hear me?
There will be no translation.
They can hear her.
Okay, so it's something in our room.
Yeah.
Who can you hear?
People who are participating also online.
Oh. That's best.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry about that delay there, Sarah, but thanks for hanging on while we troubleshooted there.
No problem. Does that mean you guys can hear me now?
Yep. And can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Great, so it's all yours. I'm gonna let you share your screen and you can walk us through the Blue-Green Master Plan.
Okay, great. Hold on one second. Thanks a lot, you guys. I wasn't quite sure how this was gonna go. So give me just a second. Can you guys see my full screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, success, we did it. Thanks a lot. Hi, I'm Sarah Hope. I work for the Greater Baybrook Alliance, and as was previously mentioned, we have been working on the Blue-Green Master Plan. I just want to mention that this plan would not have happened without a lot of partners and experts. We worked with a consultant called EnviroCollab, who's a landscape architecture and planning firm to develop this plan. I will say that we're near the final stages of producing the document. It is a 90-page document that I'm going to summarize in 10 minutes. And I've included a lot of slides in here that are more for you guys to look at afterwards. So I'll probably be moving through them kind of quickly. The University of Maryland College Park also participated in the stakeholder committee, Cityscape Engineering. And since the development of this plan, we've partnered with WSA. I'm glad that they were included in this meeting and to see them earlier to help us try to implement some of this plan. So thanks for having me. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I wanted to give the general overview of what I'm going to go over, basically who we are, why green infrastructure, the blue-green plan process, which is sort of the part that I'll be moving through very quickly, and then most importantly, the results of the plan and what comes next. So GBA is a nonprofit community development organization working in Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County, specifically focused on Brooklyn Park, and Curtis Bay areas. So we're not looking at the full Anne Arundel County. The blue-green plan for us, you know, Anne Arundel County is doing their big green infrastructure master plan, which is giving recommendations. This plan is more of like, while that is a macro kind of level plan, ours is more of a micro level plan. We have specific sites that we've identified, and we've begun to tackle some of those, the design and implementation of some of those sites and projects. So we'll be looking at some of those today. So the goal for the Green Infrastructure Master Plan is really, for us, because we're a community development organization, we're looking more at how can we make these communities a place where people want to live. That in turn, you know, produces better economic development, better housing options, and better quality of life for the people who live there. So we're looking at this through the lens of course, improved water quality, but also on a people scale, what the plan can do. So we wanted to make sure, we know that these areas have a lot of parks and available green space, but felt like they weren't necessarily connected to those green spaces, that getting there was challenging, that people weren't using those green spaces. And so we looked at ways that we could improve that. Of course, we want to increase the environmental resilience of the community, but we also use it as an opportunity to teach people and educate people about what blue and green infrastructure is. I know you guys were just shown a lot of really amazing examples, but there are very simple things that people can do as well. And then in the end, to enhance the quality of life of all the residents. So in developing the blue-green plan, we basically, you know, it was in the pandemic, we had a lot of challenges facing us in terms of outreach. And so we developed a full website, which I plan to share in the chat and I hope can get sent out later to help us engage the community. The first step of doing that was educating, as I mentioned, the public about what blue and green infrastructure is. We called it a blue-green makeover, which I thought was very fun. Basically, you know, some of the examples you saw, rain gardens, big stormwater ponds that I think Mark was showing earlier, are some of those examples, but just also, you know, conservation plantings, you know, removing impervious surface, planting a tree, those can all also be ways to improve the blue-green environment. So once we did sort of some thorough outreach and education, we went to the community and we asked them to map assets and challenges for blue-green infrastructure in the community. Challenges look like things like where trash collects, a source of pollution, where there's heavy traffic, and assets would be a park, a green space, a stormwater facility, or just as simple as a corridor that has a lot of trees. We then took those mapped sites that the community identified and looked at them through the lens of science, existing conditions on the land. So topography, soil, land use, and then also where existing stormwater facilities were. Finally, we overlaid those with, where people are. We wanted to make sure that the plan was equitable. So we looked at population density. We looked at household income to make sure that people without cars still had access to green areas. So finally, the design team did some site visits. We identified several corridors sort of that followed areas where people had identified assets and challenges, and we took a look around. So basically all of that culminated in the identification of 19 potential sites. Now, these aren't the only available sites. They're just sites that sort of fell into places where the tree canopy was low, green infrastructure was low, flooding was high. It was the overlay of all of those sites that were identified, potential soil that could be treated, and this was the result of that overlay and analysis. So we wound up identifying corridors, vacant lots, potentially nonprofit partners, education facilities that were existing like schools, and we didn't want to discount private property. I think the thing that's nice about looking at a nonprofit or a government-owned property to do stormwater mitigation on is that it can be somewhat easier to get permission. You know, the government has goals to tackle some of these challenges, and so it's much easier to partner. But there were some properties that we looked at that really, suggested that they could be improved by green infrastructure, and we didn't want to remove those as options. So this is where the presentation gets long, and I'm going to blow through all of these, just pointing out what the 19 sites were. So Patapsco Avenue was one, and each one of these slides gives examples of the types of green infrastructure that potentially could be used at the site. I would encourage everybody to go back and look at these in more detail if you're interested. Of the other corridors, the 6th Street corridor, Curtis Avenue, and Pennington Avenue were also identified. Vacant lots at the 1800 block of Gretna, as well as the 800 block of Jeffrey Street, and a vacant lot at West Bristol Avenue. We looked at City of Refuge. They're a partner nonprofit with a huge amount of pavement in an area that gets very heavy flooding. We are excited to learn that they plan to develop the site and incorporate green infrastructure there. The Brooklyn Bible Chapel, also a private religious site. United Way Neighborhood Zone, located at Ben Franklin High School, and The Well. Educational facilities, we identified Ben Franklin High School, which already has a history of green infrastructure projects and impervious surface removal, as well as Marie G. Faring Elementary School and Park Elementary School. Now, we also were looking at sites where people were routinely traveling. It's, you don't want to make a big investment in an area where no one's going to see it. So we not only wanted places that would be functional, but that would be visible and useful. Bingo World, I bet everybody is familiar with the site, has a massive parking lot of impervious surface and floods at the base of 10th Street and Belgrove Road frequently. We felt that the parking lot could use some improvement there. Also, Shaggy's used tires at Belgrove and Ritchie Highway. The strip mall at 5026 Governor Ritchie Highway, where the tattoo shop is and where Linda's sub shop is. And then Brooklyn Cycle World. So restoration and conservation areas, these are more like parks and big open green spaces that have a little bit more opportunity. Fairing Bay Brook Park and Recreation Center has a big stream that could be a larger project to restore. So in the end, the results were that the development of the plan resulted in 4 prioritized goals, 19 specific sites, 6 corridors that we identified as connectors that could use improvement and were priorities. Then we're going to go on to look at the 3 sites that were further developed. So when we wrote the grant, we said we would do this blue-green plan, we would do the analysis, we would do the outreach, and in the end, we wanted some direct outcomes. And so 3 of the sites were prioritized to be further developed, and we engaged a civil engineer and a landscape architect to further design those. And so we'll look at those sites. 4 projects are already moving forward towards implementation. And in the end, we'll have 1 guiding document. Now, that's not to say we looked at in the development of this plan, there are probably 4 or 5 other small watershed planning documents for the area, 1 focusing on Masonville Cove, 1 also focusing on the Middle Branch Park area. And so those were all sort of evaluated to see if we could move forward with some more direct goals towards implementation. So lastly, we took those 19 sites and we went back to the community and polled people to see what their priorities were so that we could select the 3 sites that would be further developed. In the end, Patapsco Avenue, the strip mall at 5026 Ritchie Highway and Fairing Bay Brook Park became the most viable candidates. While Pennington Avenue did receive a lot of votes, when we went and walked the site, there were actually no feasible areas to put green infrastructure. Now, GBA is working on a plan to convert Pennington Avenue and Curtis Avenue from one-way streets to two-way streets in Curtis Bay. And at that point in time, we might free up some space in the right-of-way to potentially add trees, or bump outs or stormwater facilities there. But for now, there was no viable space to do that. So we moved forward with the 3 projects I mentioned. And these are the design results. So most of these plans were developed to about 30% design. That's a little beyond concept level. So they have planting plans that are also included. This is the Governor Ritchie Highway site. There was a lot of pavement in front of the building. It looked like at one time that there had been tree pits there. There was obviously some places where runoff was collecting in front of the business, and it looked like potentially, could flood the inside of the business. And it just felt like a great place to add some more shade and to make that place a little bit more comfortable to spend time in for the several businesses that occupy that building. Next, Patapsco Avenue was mostly a tree planting plan and infill. We wound up taking these plans and applying to Chesapeake Bay Trust for tree planting money. We did receive that grant, and we have been implementing the pavement removal and tree plantings, both on Hanover Street and East Patapsco. But we also have added Riverside Park, which recently was planted with trees. And I believe it's Old River, is it Riverside Drive.
Riverside.
Old Riverside Drive, thank you. As a potential corridor to receive, trees as well. So these are the plans from Patapsco Avenue. And then finally, Ferry and Baybrook Park. You may not be familiar with this park since I know this is mostly an Anne Arundel County audience, but a new school was built at the park that incorporates a new to the community middle school, and several students from Curtis Bay now have to get to another, like through the park to go to school. And there's not really a direct route. And so the kids were using this path, and there was a lot of erosion coming from like a huge building. And so this site focuses more on treating that runoff and improving the path and connection to the school for kids. So basically at this point, I wanted to just mention, you know, we're looking at this plan as a guiding document for us on how we can fundraise. We originally got money from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to develop the plan. We've subsequently got Keep Maryland Beautiful funds, Chesapeake Bay Trust funds. We've partnered with Anne Arundel County's Watershed Stewardship Academy to also get a NIFWIP grant to hopefully try to implement that Ritchie Highway site. I mentioned before, we got the tree funding, and we've gotten some design funding to further develop some of these plans. Now, I added future requests and opportunities that are more community-based. So GBA manages a program called the Spruce Up Grants. They are available to community associations and groups. If there was a project in the plan that somebody was interested in pursuing, or if there's a space that you felt aligned with the goals of the Blue-Green Master Plan and you wanted to, you know, do a tree planting in your neighborhood, you could apply to GBA for Spruce Up grant funds. Similarly, the Chesapeake Bay Trust offers community-based funding that they call outreach grants on a rolling basis. It's about $5,000. And that money can go a long way when you're incorporating volunteers. They're also for commercial businesses and for residents are local tax rebates. I know in Baltimore City, you know, if you remove pavement or include treatment in your residential property, that you can get a tax rebate on your I believe it's on your water bill. Keep Maryland Beautiful is up to, I believe, $10,000 and can be used for these types of projects. And then private industry grants like Lowe's also offer funds for stuff like this. So basically, in the end, I just wanted to summarize, you know, the next steps for us are that we're going to finalize and share the Baybrook Blue-Green Plan widely. We're going to keep working with partners and property owners to get permission to implement these projects. We are still raising funds for prioritized projects with implementation plans in the works. We want to engage the community as the plan develops. Nothing's worse than, you know, having a plan, moving forward with it and not talking to anyone about it. We want to work collaboratively to implement the projects, and we want to adapt the plan based on new opportunities and limitations. It was pretty interesting when we did the site visits to see, you know, you think a site is good, and then you figure out, well, you know, people are really using this parking lot all day, every day, and maybe it's not a great place to remove all of the impervious surface and asphalt. For us, what we are really hoping for is that residents also help us support the plan. So reading and sharing the plan. If there's a project that speaks to you, maybe championing that project, connecting with local water quality partners like WSA and in Baltimore, Blue Water Baltimore. looking for new projects, you know, if you see something that you're like, this would make a great place to include a rain garden or tree planting, I would really encourage you to reach out to us. And then, you know, you can also keep it simple. It's as easy as reporting a problem with trash, planting a tree, or volunteering at a cleanup. It doesn't have to be complicated to participate. So that's how'd I do on time there? Oh, not bad. I think there was time scheduled for questions. Does anyone have any questions about the plan? I mentioned before, I'm sad that the plan is not completely finished, but I am going to share the website and we'll be posting the finalized document on our website, on that website, so that you guys can take a look. And then I'm hoping that this presentation is made available to everybody that attended.
Anyone have any questions?
Someone has a question on mine. I know you said, Ryland, I know you said you wanted to be anonymous. But Hope, would you be able to present the Blue Green Initiative to Friends of Fairing Baybrook Park when complete?
Would I be able to, sorry, I couldn't hear all of that.
So would you be willing to present the Blue Green Initiative to Friends of Fairing Baybrook Park when it's completed?
Oh, yeah, of course. The Friends of Fairing Baybrook Park is an entity that I believe is also getting developed in partnership with GBA. So once they're having routine meetings, I would definitely be willing to present.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to breakout groups? Okay. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so what we're going to do next is break up into two small groups for the SAC members. The public, you all can, again, you can stay in your seats and listen into the discussion. And then for folks on the call over Zoom, unfortunately, we're going to have to pause you until we then reconvene and do a group share out then of what the groups discussed. But the instructions then for when we do break up into the groups, we're going to break up into an open space and green space group, and then one on water quality, talk about some of the items that we heard today, as well as in front of you are draft strategies, draft recommendations, based on everything that the Office of Planning and Zoning has heard essentially to date through our public engagement opportunities. So we want you all to review those, react to them, identify any new strategies. If any of those items need to be tweaked a little bit, we want you to take 5 minutes, quiet time, review those, reflect on them, and then we're going to give you 3 post-it notes. You're going to write what strategies are missing, what strategies maybe need to be tweaked or removed, or any of your additional thoughts, and then we're going to group them together. We'll see if they stick on the wall. If not, we can just stick them on the table, and we can see how some of these are sort of coming together, where we see some of the similarities. We're going to use one idea on each of the stickies, and then we can start our discussion trying to flesh out some of these issues a little bit more. The one thing I do want to mention too is, or reiterate, is these region plans are that opportunity to drill deeper. So what we're gonna, some of our facilitators, Michael, Sam, and myself, Eric. Yep, there he is. Yep. We're gonna sort of be asking that you drill down even further. What locations are you thinking about? What's the specific issue, so that we can really tailor this plan or tailor these strategies to region 1, and it doesn't sound like it's just a generic strategy for the county. So we'll help guide the discussion, and then we'll also ask one of you at the end to report out to the group. That's when we reconvene, so that you can share your ideas with that other group. Okay. All right, so let's take 5 minutes. We just need to reorganize the room a little bit. Think about which group you want to be in. Mike and Sam and Eric, Mike and Sam, you guys will lead the open space, green space, and Eric and myself, and Noel and Tyrell lead the water quality group. Okay? So look for us then when you come back and we'll have the room set up.
Great to see you.
Oh, God.
Alice, you right next to me.
Oh, I'm right from the.
All right, so we're gonna give Corey the floor to share what the water quality group chatted about.
Sorry.
You need me to move on?
If you all don't mind.
No, I literally like.
It moves, so it'll pick up sound and that's what we'll look at.
Oh, it's okay. Just reconvene. We're gonna go ahead and do the breakout reports.
I hate to interrupt some of the smaller conversations here, but we're gonna give Corey the floor, okay? Great, thank you.
Hey everyone, so I'm just gonna report out on what we talked about at the water management team. So can you guys see this? Well, I'll read it out. Okay. Cleaning out storm water drains. So we felt that it was the responsibility of a partnership between HOAs, homeowners, individuals, making sure those are clean so that way we don't have flooded roads and debris blocking our drains, causing the flooding. The next part we have here is to educate those property owners about taking care of their drains. So sometimes it's not about the county having them come out. Sometimes it's about the individual, once again, taking care of their local areas. And then one of the pluses that we added to this is pet waste. I believe it was nitrates, pet food, pets put out so much waste into our waterways. So making sure that owners are liable to pick up their waste, making sure that we have the necessary infrastructure there to help them get rid of their waste properly. So whether it's a waste bin, a trash bin, whatever that may look like in those bags. Trash. So a lot of this trash gets into the storm drains and it blocks the storm drains and stops water from actually flowing out. So one of the things that we mentioned was that at bus stops, people will go to McDonald's, people will go to wherever, bring their wrappers and then have nowhere to throw them at and they just end up on the street. So that will cause those drains to get clogged up as well. So having trash cans to help people facilitate proper management of their waste. And increasing the pickup schedule of our waste. I believe in the county, it was said that we used to have bi-weekly pickups. And there's a cap on how much trash can be picked up. Working with the county leaders to make sure that we have enough cycling coming through to pick up all that waste as well. We also talked about certain roads that could be transformed to help reduce the runoff from our roads. Any roads that are kind of big or kind of oversized for their use right now. One of the roads that came up was Fort Smallwood Road. So we talked about road diets, talked about amenities as well. So whether that's like the rain gardens or the side where you get the streams at to help access some of that water from going straight to the bay. Velgrove Road was another one we talked about, and the bike pedestrian access is needed as well. So there's an initiative with the GBA that's around the Big Brook connector, making sure that when they implement that, they implement a lot of green measures with that as well. Also have flooding areas. So Velgrove was one of the areas that came up with flooding needs that happens with flooding. So making sure that we're looking at those areas that are low lying and make sure that they have a proper infrastructure to support that. New developments. So whenever there's a new development, one thing that we're really concerned about, especially in area 1, is a lot of the area in the past had industrial uses. So as they're building new sites, we're concerned about when they dig up that soil that has some contaminants in it from years ago, that water is going to be running off into our local waterways, as well as other issues that we might have from that as well. So we have Superfund sites and brownfield sites for EPA designation for sites that are past contaminated that need to be cleaned up. Making sure those are properly maintained. Best management practices, implementing those into our various communities. So we have rain gardens in parentheses here, making sure that water is being treated before it gets into our waterways as well. And having that partnership with HOAs to make sure they're educated. I forgot the name. The guys in the back over there, they do like a workshop, working with them to make sure that not only are HOAs knowledgeable, but our community members themselves are knowledgeable, that they're getting that knowledge and a platform in a way that is easy for them to digest. Once we have those different pieces added to the community, how do we maintain those as well? There was a conversation around, once we implement these wonderful measures around water waste retention and measurement, how do we make sure that in 5 years, when that land is sold to someone else, that they're still taking care of it? We talk about preserving them, preserving those features as well. And so the pavement, so a lot of the pooling that happens, we have a lot of paved road in zone 1 in the sense that like Bingo, where we talked about it earlier. How do we get a lot of these privately owned areas to change over to a way that is not flooding the community, that we are access our water is made clean. And we talked about different credits that we could do, different fees. How do we entice new development and redevelopment to implement those measures as well? Okay. Yeah. And so going on that same point, providing credits, whether it's from the county level or community level, to help them implement those new measures. And water access was the big point that we talked about. You all see the maps behind us on tables here, but if we look at Region 1, we are surrounded by water, but our community doesn't have a lot of access to water. We talk about Fort Smallwood and Fort Armistead, and they're not really in our region. I mean, Fort Armistead is in Baltimore City, and Fort Smallwood, I think, in Region 4. So we have all this beautiful potential to have fishing, trails, and forests, and we have tons of waterways here, but having that equitable access to water, clean water, that we can all benefit from as well. And that is it.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna just say right now, you were far better organized with your writing, keeping track of what your thoughts were as you went along, because we didn't do that until the very end. So we don't have it quite there as succinctly stated as you did. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. We'll try to make the best sense of this so you all understand. We've got a couple themes. We all feel that, of course, that with respect to the community, that we're speaking to Region 1, one of the core importance improvements that we can identify and focus on is streetscape improvements and open space and preserving them, expanding them where we can possibly. We identify, I just suppose we can't see that. So streetscape improvements, maximizing the streetscape improvements. So we were identifying that through a variety of different avenues. Consider having industrial zone. Buyers invest in tree planting and native species. We will also talk about having opportunities to save the trees instead of removing them or replacing them. And then the question became, when we talk about trees and planting more of them in communities, it was brought up that maybe there was a challenge with respect to safety, because over the years, past, if you remember, the concerns were that people might use trees to hide barriers away from them, criminal activity potentially. So you have to add these back, with that in mind. Obviously, some lighting is going to have to come to that in areas where there may be challenges and concerns about that. So that was an important feature that someone added in, and we identify and recognize. And also a part of streetscapes, benches. Since we have an elderly population, folks who are waiting for buses or transportation or just want to enjoy the area as we improve it, benches should be added to and be considered as part of those improvements in that day. So number 2, I'm going to skip for a minute because I think that's probably critical for us all to recognize, because that's one of the things that's most important for us. We have the hardest time, so we'll get back to that. So 3 is improving access to green space. So it's really the accessibility to it. One of the ideas was if you're in communities that are more urbanized, a rule of thumb could be 10 minutes walking distance from a green space or a park. That would be something that would be ideal for those areas. Connection of bike trails. There's a lot of disjointed segments of bike trails in our community. We have a lot of bike trails. There's some opportunity to connect those bike trails in some of the areas that we have in the county, actually York County, which is great in this region. And then develop existing parks with more walking trails. So there may be parks that exist with less walking trails that we can just enhance those in place today. There's opportunities there for us as well. Number 4 is providing more green space, maximizing green space opportunities and retrofits of areas that exist, returning things to greener space, taking advantage of redevelopment opportunities, prioritizing redevelopment of space as opposed to developing vacant space is certainly something that we spoke to as well.
and acquiring unprotected property from owners where possible, where there's a funding opportunity. So that really gets to number 4, which is important for all of us. And being in government as I am, and these folks around the table, it's the hardest thing that we have the opportunity to find resources for, it's the funding. So, you know, I think what we're thinking was right now, you know, we're in a time where everyone wants to, you know, change the planet. Everyone wants to, you know, save the planet. Well, where there's opportunities to partner and to gain sponsorship opportunities for corporations to do things like we've seen, you know, new roadways, streetscapes and things like that. Just continue to expand it to, you know, open spaces, conservation of you know, areas in Capsco Park. So whatever happens to be where things need to be cleaned up and improved and better, there's opportunities to capitalize on investments for people who want to make their communities better, which they live and work. So that's why number 4 was actually really last, because all this costs a lot of money that we always know is hard to find. Next.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I think we had a great discussion. We've got some additional ideas that we will add to that recommendation sheet. So next up on the agenda, before I move on to that, like I said, we'll be adding to this list. And then when we have our drop-in sessions, which I'll get to when we talk about next steps, is when we'll open this up for the public to review, and we'll be interacting with folks at the library to discuss those further. So next on the agenda is the public comment period. And Karen, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, yes, so we're going to open up the public comments. And if you could just be mindful of the 2 minutes duration, and please speak your name so that we know who we're interacting with. Thank you. Go ahead and open the floor up for questions.
And if everybody here in person has any comments, I'll open it up to folks online. And if you want to use the raise hand function, we'll be able to then call on you and you'll be allowed to speak. So.
And I'll note, as you look at that, that Councilman Pete Smith had joined virtually and put a note in saying he's looking forward to working with this group to ensure we sustain and build the best communities possible.
Yeah. So thank you, Councilman, for joining in. So again, last call for anybody in person as well as then online for public comment.
And for anyone online, if you'd like to comment, you can use the raise hand feature. If you just get a toolbar at the bottom of your screen underneath the reactions.
Okay. There we go. Okay, Jim, you're on. You just have to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Jim, speak again.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I thought the presentations were great tonight. Sorry I couldn't be there. I'm under the weather. One observation I had was I thought Darian's presentation was really comprehensive. It might be helpful from a mapping perspective to see if we could get an overall map of District 1, labeling any registered historic sites, just to keep in context as we look at Region 1 going forward from a growth and development perspective.
Yeah, we've got some resources we can share. This is Mike Stringer in response to that. There are some of those things that they intentionally do not put out in public because, you know, concerns of vandalism or looting, but we'll see what we can publicly share about some of those resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me go back to our slide deck here and just go through some of our next steps. Okay, some of these. So before we actually have our next meeting, Office Planning and Zoning, and I apologize if before we may have said OPZ, sometimes we'll refer to ourselves as OPZ for short, get used to it. That's what we might be using periodically. So OPZ will be opening up a few public comment periods where on Wednesday, December 6th, from about 11 to 7 p.m., we'll be at the Linthicum Library right here, just hanging out. We'll have these recommendations that you see here, but also refined based on the discussion today. And again, allow the public to come in and share their thoughts about after they've had a chance to review those, because that is actually up on the website now. And I can add that the web address for our hub site, which is what we're referring to, where we have all our information. We'll also have an online questionnaire. So if you can't meet us in person and tell us what you think about some of these recommendations, you'll be able to participate online and do it from the comfort of your home. Then our next Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting is December 13th. Again, same time, 5:30 to roughly 8:30. And we'll be at the Anne Arundel Workforce Development Center. And there we'll be talking about economic development and schools. Okay. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Just real quick about the drop-in session, it might just sharing a link, but is there like a PDF, shareable PDF that we can provide to like community members or other organizations?
Yep, we're developing a series of both print materials and digital materials that you can share, again, as if you want to do a hard copy with some friends and family and neighbors, or if you want to put it up on a Facebook page, we'll be able to provide you with those links as well. Yeah, so I'm going to follow up in an email. There was a lot of discussion, some things that we can. Oh, great. I'm going to call on him then right away. One second. Okay, Councilman, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Perfect. You're on.
Oh, wow. Thank you. No, I jumped on late, was leaving another meeting. But this region team meeting is so important, certainly to me. And so over the next couple of months, as we dive into this, my goal is certainly to preserve as much as possible, but while at the same time providing opportunities. I don't know if you all know this. We're looking at housing as a sort of major crisis in Anne Arundel County. And so where we can make opportunities, I want us to be mindful of that. But where we need to protect communities and the identities of communities, we need to do that as well. So I don't necessarily want us to sort of be microscopic, if you will, because it is we are a county and we'll certainly do our part where it's necessary. But I'm super excited about this opportunity to sort of look at what certainly Region 1, but Anne Arundel County as a whole will look like for the coming years, if not coming decades. And so what you are doing right now is sort of putting a map or a pin on the map to say, this is who we will be in the next 10 years or the next 15 years. And so that's the lens we need to look at this from so that we can look far out and make sure that we preserve what we need to preserve, but provide opportunities where we need to provide opportunities. And so thank you all for willing to be a part of this process and protecting the identity of the community, but also making sure that your kids and our family members can still enjoy the communities that given us so much. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Great, thank you. Okay, so before I turn to Karen to ask for a motion to adjourn, Mike, Sam, Eric, Noel, Harel, did I catch everybody that's partnered with us this evening? Any last words?
It's really late and it's like, I really liked when we had the early meeting. Is there any way you can consider that?
We have set up these, we coordinated with various venues, reserved the times. And when we asked for applications for you all to serve, we wanted to make sure that we were very clear on the specific days that we were meeting. I don't know if we have any flexibility with time, but at least we want to set these dates and these venues.
Yeah, it was a Saturday.
Yeah.
That's got its challenges too.
Ask for a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, everyone. Come, we can look for a motion to adjourn.
A motion to
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Go.